Mr. Shuen.
Please call me Andrew. That's how they call my father.
Andrew.
Yes.
It took us a long time to know each other.
Yes.
And even until this moment, I'm so, let me put it this way, I'm proud to get to know you. Okay? But I'm sure the audience
I like the but.
No, the audience want to know you too.
Oh,
so
okay.
could you kindly just let us know who you are and just give us a little briefing.
I am 38. I'm a Hong Kong Chinese
Single? Are you
male.
single?
I am, as of currently, I am single, not married yet. Born and bred in Hong Kong, raised in Hong Kong until the age of 19. And then I went to the United States for my tertiary education, where I got my bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan. And then I returned to Hong Kong and has worked as first as an equity analyst, and then now as
you follow the money, huh?
Yes, I do follow the money. I am now a financial and political commentator. So that is actually my job. So that's my background.
Well, but that doesn't satisfy my curiosity. Judging from what I've learned from your previous videos and history, I understand you are philosophically sound. Is that part of your hobby? You love. It seems to me you have read far more than just follow the money thing.
I would say I'm blessed with a lot of thinking peers. I co-founded a public policy think tank called the Lion Rock Institute roughly 11 years ago.
I see.
And through that particular organization, I got to enjoy a lot of banter and discussion with my friends. In fact, I'm probably the one who is the least capable of thinking. So they are far superior in their thought process. But Doctor, I am quite honored.
Call me Bob.
Dr. Bob, I'm quite honored that you think that I'm philosophically sound.
Essentially, I'm just making a statement of fact. This is not placebo. This is reality.
Yes.
What I've seen in Andrew in you is something that amazes me. Your thinking pattern. But I could not help myself but to think a little harder. That I think there's a core of you, and this core, which is very, very unique. Okay, unique because I grew up mostly in United States. Okay, for decades and decades I've been there. So I kind of know how you think, but I kind of don't know how you think, because my core of Hong Kong is far lesser in its degree than you are. So starting from this point, okay, I know there have been considerable deep level thinking that are tectonic in this in your shift of what you wanted to do, what you have been doing. Now, in order to drive at this core, let's get back to what Hong Kong is. A lot of if you go outside to West Virginia, for example, okay, they may know Bruce Lee.
Yes.
Okay, but they may not know Hong Kong.
Yes.
So let's date back ourselves to 1200 years ago in Song Dynasty, all right? And right here in the local, this little fishing village, okay, I want you to give us a briefing. I'm not sure you're familiar with that part of the history of Hong Kong. 1200 years ago.
I'm actually not quite familiar. All I know is that one of the emperors had to come here, and they left a piece of stone.
In that case, let's put it this way. Hong Kong, and 1200 years ago, is far more than a fishing village as people post it to be, which is ridiculous. Hong Kong is actually a transit point between here and this connection to other ocean countries.
Well, if you start off with the geopolitics of Hong Kong, a lot of Hong Kong quote unquote experts and intellectuals in academics, they usually leave out the geography in geopolitics. which is quite unfortunate. But Hong Kong is situated at the Pearl River mouth. The Pearl River is one of the three major rivers in China, and in economics, if you look at the British currency, the one they use in England, on the £20 note they commemorate Adam Smith. And Adam Smith's, of course, amazing discovery, or at least observation, is through the division of labor, through specialization, people's productivity increases and therefore creates surpluses, and through trading raises everyone's living standards. But of course, in the process of specialization and creating that specific product or service that you're good at, you would accumulate so much that you have to transport it. And even from the times of the pyramids to today, even to today, water transport, particularly river transport, has always been the cheapest per tonnage per kilometer, okay, per distance traveled. And therefore, when transportation cost is that low, people all along the river can engage in specialization and therefore be increasingly productive, create the surpluses, and therefore create capital, and therefore further enhance their ability to produce, and therefore further enhance their living standards. And traditionally, the capital would usually accumulate at the mouth of the river. And that gave rise, especially in the age after the Industrial Revolution, gives rise to a lot of global financial centers. New York being one of the examples. I think it's Hamburg being another example. Hong Kong, obviously. Shanghai being another example. So anywhere where there is water transportation, because of transportation cost, it would give a natural advantage for that place to accumulate capital. And once you start accumulating capital, you will start accumulating human beings who are smart enough to manage that capital and invest the capital. So that is how the rise of Hong Kong is. But of course, you can talk about the 1200 years ago during the Song Dynasty.
Yeah.
But I would fast forward a little bit to the Qing Dynasty.
Okay.
And especially the Ming Dynasty. Because in the Ming and Qing Dynasty, we're talking about the age of Marco Polo, when Venice was at its apex in the Western world.
Right.
The Ming Dynasty was very fearful of pirates and of foreign influence, and therefore actually ordered, those two dynasties ordered people living on the coastal areas to retreat from the coastal areas, to depopulate the coastal areas.
Yeah, but I remember that time one of the big problems was the Japanese, actually.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, you're talking about pirates. This is pirates with a national flag.
Yeah, how times have... Well, I'm not going to comment on Japanese on this one. But all I can say that it became national policy, and Hong Kong was...
No pun intended.
Hong Kong was depopulated as a coastal area, you know. And if you talk about the coastal area, Hong Kong was depopulated. So if you were to talk about today's Hong Kong, I would actually start off with when the rise of the British Empire.
That's what I meant to ask you. Given this Delta culture, its proximity to a vast array of shipping lines.
Yes.
Okay. So, would you say Hong Kong, regardless of who the government will be, eventually will evolve into a very major city?
It would have a natural tendency to accumulate capital if the hinterland, the watershed area of the Pearl River Delta, or even beyond, remains productive. But of course, as I think the 20th century has proven that public policy, especially the wrong type of public policy, can be highly destructive to capital accumulation. I mean, Shanghai was basically in a time capsule from 1949 onwards until probably the early 1990s, right? So, you know, just because geography gives you the advantage doesn't mean that the politics would be there to help you. And therefore, if you were to compare and contrast, because where Shanghai is at the mouth of the Yangtze River, Yangtze River with its length, with its depth, is actually a naturally more competitive port city than Hong Kong.
Whampoa, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
that much I agree.
You know, so if they are far more advantageous geographically, they should be a far superior port.
But clearly they're not, at least for a long time.
Not yet. Well, at least for a long time, yes. Because the politics came to play. Hong Kong became this miracle. Partly because it truly was a accident of history. If we didn't, I mean, I'm one of my personal idol is a historian, a Harvard Cambridge historian by the name of Neil Ferguson. It's spelled Niall because he's Scottish, but it's pronounced Neil Ferguson. And
Niall.
Niall. Yes,
Oh, okay.
Neil Ferguson.
Yeah.
And this Ferguson has talked about the changes of, why the Western world basically rose. Why was it able to rise? And he talked about 6 apps. If you can read his book, but of course you can always just watch his TED talk. In fact, you can search now his TED talk about the rise of the Western world, about 6 apps that you can download. It includes things like mass consumerism, property rights, all that kind of stuff. And Hong Kong, compared to Shanghai, was able to download these 6 apps because by accident we became part of the British Empire during the Victorian era.
I got to inject something here for the listeners who are not familiar with the history of Hong Kong.
Oh, yes.
Okay, sometimes in our geopolitical or just history, okay, one warfare, one incident can change the fate of a place.
Yes.
May it be in the United States or in England.
Yes.
Okay, so could you bring us up to date as to what do you mean by accident?
Well, this is according to The Economist, so I guess it has some credibility amongst the intelligentsia audience out there. But according to The Economist, probably after the fall of the Roman Empire, even with the Eastern Roman Empire, once the Western Roman Empire fell, China had the highest GDP in the world. It has the highest GDP per capita in the world, at least until the rise of the Portuguese and Spanish in the age of discovery of the 16th century and 17th century. But if you talk about GDP size, it was well into the Qing dynasty, early 19th century that China still had the biggest GDP. The Indians out there, the Indian audience out there might disagree, which I think is well founded. But I would say that China is right up there as the biggest economies in the world, and one of the rising nations with the most advanced technology, Britain, wanted to trade and make some money out in China. I mean, they had a lot of enterprising entrepreneurs, and China, of course, closed its ports to official policy to close its ports, and didn't want to trade with Britain. So there are these enterprising Scottish, really, traders who discovered that there is a product which the Chinese would buy in insatiable quantities. To be honest, if you find anything the Chinese would buy, it will be in insatiable quantities. Right? So that's what they discovered was opium. Opium, of course, it's derivative from poppy, which could then be further nowadays be made into things like morphine, codeine, and heroin. Highly addictive, but of course it's a drug. And basically, the Scots in Hong Kong, they were mostly Scots, they were basically drug barons, and they ran a lot of opium into China, and it caused a widespread leakage. I mean, of course there were social problems, but one of the biggest problems was that China leaked out a lot of national wealth through this trade, and so there was this government official.
You're talking about Qing Dynasty.
Qing Dynasty, late 1830s.
Right.
Late 1830s. And this particular official called Lam Zhachan in Cantonese burnt their goods, just incinerated the opium stockpile. And of course that really angered the Scottish traders and the Telegraph. I guess Telegraph wasn't actually connected to Hong Kong back then, but they wrote a piece of letter and requested help, and the British Empire sent a gunboat and defeated the Chinese and embargoed the Grand Canal. And by blocking the Grand Canal, because China by then, of course, being the biggest GDP, had a very sophisticated, highly specialized economy, therefore having any internal disruptions would have
Literally choking China.
Yes, it would actually, well, not choke, but starve.
Yeah.
So the Qing courts surrendered and they signed a peace treaty. What the British would call the Treaty of Nanking, and what the modern day communists in China caused the first in a whole series of unequal treaties. And in that treaty, of course, the first term was to open up China for trading, limited opening, but it was an opening up. There was reparations. It was very fashionable to have reparations. Millions and millions of taels. A tael of silver. A tael is a unit of weight. A tael of silver is about 1 point something troy ounces. So we're about 30 million troy ounces of silver we paid to the British government to pay for the expedition. London actually sent direct instructions to the person in charge, which there was two, most famous one, Charles Elliot and one Henry Pottinger, and they were instructed to not take any land as colonies. They were instructed to do so because London basically lacked the resources. They lacked the personnel. They just thought that it was just too far away, surrounded by too many hostile powers. Therefore, it would be a pain to defend. So that was the instructions. But unfortunately, according to legend, by the time that the letter arrived to the negotiators, the Treaty of Nanking was signed, and in that they took Hong Kong.
So by that you mean Hong Kong was taken by accident?
Yes, well, at least that's the urban legend. I mean, of course, historians nowadays said that the London gave them free hand to take whatever they wanted to. And Charles Elliot became very conservative and took a very small island called the Hong Kong Island that was facing a very nice...
There's a whole series of unfair treaties, actually. Yes. Without going into details, let's get back to the geopolitical thing and the development of Hong Kong.
Well, basically, Hong Kong became a British colony because the British expansion, imperialistic ambition. I think it was a comedian, Trevor Noah, that says that imperialism is basically nationalism on steroids. Not only are you proud of who you are so proud of what you have that you want others be imposed upon others, right? That's colonialism in its essence. And that is what the British did to Hong Kong. And it was because of this momentary insanity in this explosion of empire that they took Hong Kong. And Hong Kong, through further series of treaties, and was enlarged. But even at its biggest, which is its current size, it is still a tiny place. Tiny place. But there are a few policies that were put in place because both Charles Elliot and Henry Pottinger, especially Henry Pottinger, which Charles Elliot, I suspect, was fired. Henry Pottinger was put in place, and Henry Pottinger, being our first governor of Hong Kong, knew that he was knee-deep in empire politics. Because if the birth of your place is accompanied by your home country explicitly telling you that there will be no headcount nor budget to run your place, and yet you are, remember, this was the 1840s here, right? You had no Suez Canal. People from England had to travel round the Cape of Good Hope into the Indian Ocean, right across the Indian Ocean, down the Malacca Straits, up the South China Sea before they get to Hong Kong. So there will be no personnel, no headcount. You are on your own, and you are surrounded by hostile and foreign powers. You know, you invaded China, you blockaded their capital. You are facing a very hostile. How are you going to defend this place? How are you going to maintain simple political control? All right. So they put in three particular. Henry Pottinger set out 3 rules in which to guarantee to play this empire game to solidify its control. Rule number 1: Hong Kong has to remain tax-free. Government will have revenue.
No, tax-free.
As in like direct taxes.
Yeah.
Okay, direct taxes, no. No income tax, no profit tax, no custom duties, I think even.
No income tax.
No profit tax.
No property tax.
No profit tax. Property tax, yes. Right?
Okay.
Majority of the government's income is going to be coming from land sales, land leases. All the land in Hong Kong, but one, is owned by the government. This is a lesson learned because British Empire, people say that the Americans' 50 states, 50, right?
Right.
Is the greatest laboratory for public policy, whereby if it works in one state, it'll be copied in another state, right? No. In history, the greatest laboratory for public policy is the British Empire. In every single colony, where one colony learns the lesson, it will be applied to other colonies. Okay? And the lesson that the British learned in the American colonies that they lost is that government has to have revenue. and it would be stupid for them to give land out to the people. Instead, land should be owned by the government and leased to the people, so that through the leasing process, the government will have a stable income, and therefore don't have to tax the tea leaves, which led to the American Revolution, according to American textbooks anyways, right? Boston Tea Party. So that was the majority of the tax coming in, and also, of course, the annual police rates, government rates, in which they levy, government rent, in which they levy on these land. Then, of course, there's the licenses. If you want to run a business, you have to pay for a license. That's the first rule. No direct taxes. The second rule is that Hong Kong government, even though they are run by the British, will respect local customs, i.e. Chinese people's customs.
Could you give us just on the side, what do you mean by Chinese custom?
Well, back then, for example, I mean, if you think female mutilation of clipping the clitoris is a bad idea, Chinese people used to completely mutilate young little girls' feet by binding them, by actually literally breaking their feet into half. Like, imagine my palm, breaking it in half and then folding it inwards. Okay? It's called foot binding. That was allowed under the Henry Pottinger. Eating dogs, for example, was a very Chinese thing.
Polygamy was allowed?
Polygamy was still allowed. Yeah, these things, basically, the British, basically said, you guys can continue to do whatever Chinese people do.
Right.
Right. And the third one is that Hong Kong has to be a free port of trade, including the enemies of the British Empire can trade freely in Hong Kong, buying and selling, whatever they wished. These three rules, from the perspective of the 21st century, seems extremely enlightened. Right? The first rule of no direct taxes, woohoo, no coercive force on the government, on the people's wallets. Great. The second rule, respecting local customs, I believe in 21st century language, will be called multiculturalism.
Well, whatever you call it. It's politics.
Hey, I went to an American university, so it's called multiculturalism, right? Diversity. The third rule, which is free port trading, right? Well, trading, free trade, great, GATT and WTO and all that, You would think all these enlightened coming from the British, you would think, this Harry Pottinger guy must be, must be one of those Wilberforce people, those people in London that was against slavery, for example. Right? Very enlightened. Wrong. He was a hard-nosed politician. He had no problems sailing a gunboat up China and firing at all these, yellow-skinned, black-haired individuals, right? That was running around like barbarians in his eyes. Right? He was a British colonialist. The reason why he implemented these three, take the first one. Direct taxes is extremely labor-intensive policy. If you don't have the tax collectors and someone decides to cheat on their taxes, you would basically, the entire system would collapse. So, land sales, on the other hand, you just need to hold an auction, right? Which is with part-time auctioneers at a table and a map in which you circle, revenue will start coming in. And once you can identify who the owner of the property is, you can then levy an annual tax on them. Simple. Business license is the same thing. Highly detectable, easy to tax.
Right.
So it is out of a lack of headcount that they went with the no-direct
I think
tax
the
rules.
audience in the United States will appreciate this very much in terms of the size and organization of Internal Revenue Service.
Right.
Versus what it was in Hong Kong. Oh, it needs just a clerk in a small office to handle the whole place.
I'll give you numbers to compare. I mean, Hong Kong started out really truly with nothing, not a lot of people, because the Ming and Qing dynasty depopulated Hong Kong. But by the 1950, 10 years after Hong Kong Island was ceded to the British, Hong Kong's population swelled to 100,000. Of 100,000 people, less than 1,000 was white people. We're talking about less than 1% of the population governing the remaining 99.
Right.
Okay? That was how efficient it was, head count-wise. And rule number one helped that. Rule number one helped by reducing the head count in the government bureaucracy, because Henry Pottinger knew that London won't be sending anyone to them, and he would have a hard time recruiting. In fact, Hong Kong was so far away and so foreign and so surrounded by hostile powers, Victorian-era parents would scare their children if they were not behaving. that if they kept on misbehaving, that they would be sent to Hong Kong as punishment. I mean, Hong Kong was even worse than Australia, and Australia is a convict colony. Anyways, rule number 2, multiculturalism. It's not because of multiculturalism that they allowed the Chinese people to break little girls' feet and continue to eat dogs and practice polygamy. But if everything that the Chinese was doing was legal, they don't even need policemen, right?
Right.
In fact, in any cultures, behavior modification takes effective policing and punishment. Effective policing and punishment takes a lot of headcounts. Policemen, judges, correctional officers, prison, you name it. They just didn't have a budget nor the headcount. Right. So whatever you guys were doing, go ahead, do it. I mean, were the British still very strong in the Victorian values of property protection? Yes. Private property reigned supreme. Okay? But apart from that, if you didn't violate someone else's property, you were allowed to do whatever you want. High degrees of social freedom. Okay? And the third rule, this one being absolutely genius, typical of empire politics. Hong Kong being a free port of trade, including even the British enemies of the British Empire. Imagine when your fleet has to sail thousands of miles. We're talking about it's equivalent of sailing your fleet from St. Petersburg to Vladivostok.
Right on.
Right? You know what happened to the Russians, right? So, when your fleet is that far away, there is no effective defense you can put in Hong Kong. And if you were sitting down, how do you reduce the incentive of the enemies to attack you? Right? Of this small port with no natural resources. So, first of all, of course, that's a natural deterrent of attacking anywhere that's a British Empire. Right? Even if the British can't really defend Hong Kong.
Well, those were the days when the British, their flag never sank.
Their
sees
flags,
no sunset.
Yes! The flags that never... the sun that never sets on the empire.
Right.
They had the ability to eradicate your capital. Basically, whatever nation you picked on any land that was of the British Empire, they would come kick your butt, right? To using American terminology. But to reduce further the incentive for people to attack, war always incur a cost, right? War, whatever scale, always incur a cost. And therefore, if you had some strategic thing that you wanted, why not, instead of fighting and incurring a cost there, why not just use the resources and buy in Hong Kong? That is how the Hong Kong tradition came by of laissez-faire economics. Okay?
This is actually a classroom example of laissez-faire economy.
Right.
Yeah.
People say that, oh, Hong Kong is a port of commerce, that's why they want to encourage free trading. Yes, to a certain extent. I'm sure the financial backers, those Scottish drug barons that were running opium into China, wanted that because of that reason. It's a commercial reason. But Henry Pottinger is a hard-nosed colonialist, right? He's an imperialist. He approved this policy, or at least maybe he even thought of this policy, because he knew that if Hong Kong was a free port, you would suddenly turn Hong Kong, instead of being a hostile eyesore for the surrounding powers, into one that would be useful to the surrounding powers, aligning their interest with us. Therefore, not only would they not be hostile, they would actually actively protect us. Ingenious. And that is one of the reasons why I think there is no one left in the world.
Did he came up with this idea, or is this...
I am pretty sure that someone in the British Empire, through painful lessons, learned this lesson, wrote it in a file somewhere, filed it in London, and then when he had to come up with policies in order to dissuade other people from attacking, he could access this library of knowledge. And that is why the British Empire is probably the greatest laboratory of public policy ever in the history of mankind. Alright?
Amazing.
Amazing. It is ingenious.
It is amazing. Turning into a fishing village into a free port.
Right.
Where you can... You're talking about anything.
Anything you can trade in Hong Kong.
Including all military craft.
Hey! I'll get back to that. There are laws against military ammunition trading in Hong Kong. I'll get back to that one. But the most important thing is that if you're a Jamaican, if you're a South African, if you're an Egyptian, if you are an Iraqi, if you are an American, a Canadian, an Australian, a Hong Kong Chinese, a Malaysian, right? We share the same British imperial heritage.
Right.
The common law system still runs through most of us, for example. Right? So, that is one of the lessons that we trace back to Henry Pottinger's day. Ingenious, and that was when Hong Kong's luck started. Because those 3 rules were great to keep political control despite a lack of budget and headcount. Yes. But the unintended consequence, well, those 3 rules also created unprecedented prosperity in this place, right? And this economic miracle.
I couldn't help but just thinking about in today's internet, because of the lack of control, because it is so universal, even the codes you use are pretty much universal, okay? And it's blossoming, and it's beyond control, okay? Think about Hong Kong as a little miniature of that at that point.
Yes. In fact, we're probably the dark web. All a lot of stuff they're not supposed to go on will go on in Hong Kong. Anyhow, Hong Kong's luck continued on with the fortune of the British Empire, and because of our geography.
Well, I need to ask you again. What do you mean? Why you keep saying that that's luck? That because of these 3 policies. It's not luck.
Luck. These 3 policies are obviously not luck. These 3 policies were clearly thought out by Henry Pottinger and implemented.
Right.
But Henry Pottinger didn't have to take Hong Kong. He could have say gone to Shenzhen.
Right.
Zhongshan.
Right.
Right. He could have gone anywhere along the river estuary. Right. Why Hong Kong? He could have gone to Shanghai. He could have gone somewhere else. He doesn't have to be Hong Kong. It's just so uniquely. It has its Pearl River. It doesn't have to be Pearl River. It could be somewhere else.
It just happens
it could be
to
Tianjin.
be. So you call it
just
luck.
Right.
Right.
Just dumb luck. China has 3 major rivers. Why the Pearl River Delta? Why not some other river delta?
Right. Now the audience know. Here we go. Hong Kong.
Yes, Hong Kong. Yeah, that's very right. And lots of fortunes. Hong Kong's fortunes, of course, it kept on growing. Lots of disturbances around the area. Hong Kong became that oasis of peace. All right. Dr. Sun Yat-sen, who eventually overthrew the Qing dynasty and established China as a republic, right? Based in Hong Kong, went to Hong Kong's medical school. He was a student in Hong Kong. He was a long time based in Hong Kong. In fact, if you go to Hong Kong Island right now, there's actually a trail dedicated. You can walk this trail. It's in the urban area, so it's not a very long trail. And where he hung out. So Dr. Sun Yat-sen overthrew the Qing dynasty, based in Hong Kong, for a large part of his life. Then, before 1949, Hong Kong was actually the Chinese Communist Party's biggest base in southern China.
Now that I didn't even know.
Let's
clarify that again.
I was told that by my former mentor, where I served an internship for a year. The Undersecretary for the Environment, right now, a former Hong Kong legislator by the name of Christine Low. She also went to my high school.
Yeah.
She also went to my high school.
I heard of her.
But anyway, she told me that Hong Kong was the biggest base for the Chinese Communist Party in southern China prior to 1949. Okay, so Hong Kong had that tradition of allowing a lot of things that goes on.
So you are talking about more than just the commercial item. You're talking about influx of ideas.
Yes.
It's a safe house for anybody.
Well, I won't call it. They didn't actively protect anyone.
Yeah.
They simply said, we are not going to discriminate. Whoever wants to come, come. I guess, in the eyes of the nationalist, the Kuomintang, for you American viewers out there, Chiang Kai-shek hated the communists probably with the same intensity as Assad hates ISIS. Imagine a city near Syria in which they are harboring ISIS. That city better be pretty good, right?
Right.
So anyways, Hong Kong should have ended as a British colony. Hong Kong's luck, if you define luck as running a set of public policy which reflects Victorian British imperial values, okay? Those luck should have ran out with the British Empire around the Second World War.
Why so? You extrapolate that a little
bit. If you look at the end of the First World War, when the Treaty of Versailles was signed, that was at least landmass-wise the apex of the British Empire, right? I controlled India, Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, most of Africa, lots of Asia, North America, Canada. bits of South America, but you knew its power was in decline.
Right.
The First World War sapped its imperial energy, and it just couldn't afford running the empire anymore. And in 1941, the Japanese, in fact, proved beyond a doubt that the British can no longer hold Hong Kong as a colony.
Yeah, I think they just simply marched in, except for little resistance in new territory.
Right. On the 8th of December, or 8th of December 1941, the Japanese marched into Hong Kong. For you American viewers out there, that date sounds sort of familiar because it's a day after your Pearl Harbor got bombed. But I would just like to say that it is that Japanese bombed Hawaii, and
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor, and marched into Hong Kong at the same time. We are a day ahead because Hawaii is behind the international dateline, right? So it was a simultaneous operation, and they attacked us, and within 3 weeks Hong Kong fell to the Japanese.
Right.
Proving beyond a doubt that there was never enough military power in Hong Kong to defend Hong Kong. And Hong Kong was unmolested, both due to the unseen empire power of the British, and also because of policies in place in Hong Kong. And in fact, if you were to ask lots of governors since the 1840s up until probably the 1920s and 30s in Hong Kong, they would all say the single biggest threat to Hong Kong's remaining as a British colony would probably come from China. But then China was very weak, right? They would have never managed to beat the Japanese. Okay? So, those of you who's watching it will probably ask me now, if Henry Pottinger is so good and his 3 rules are so good at preventing attacks,
Right.
why did the Japanese choose to attack Hong Kong? That is a very good question. My guess is this. My guess is that Hong Kong, of course, being part of the British Empire, had to officially participate in a lot of British imperial actions. All right? And you got to understand, if you went to the American school system, if you were brainwashed by the American school system, Second World War lasted 3-4 odd years, right? From when Pearl Harbor attacked to when the Japanese surrendered after Nagasaki got bombed. But if you went to the British system, the Second World War started in 1939 September when Nazi Germany marched into Poland. If you were brainwashed by the British, that was when the war started, right? But if you were brainwashed by the communist Chinese curriculum, war started in 1937 when the Japanese marched from Manchuria into China.
8 years.
8 years,
Yeah,
right.
right.
Cantonese called Balingonzi, which literally means the 8 years resistance.
8 years of
resistance.
defiance as well. Yeah.
Yes. So it depends on which school system you went to. But my guess was that if Hong Kong followed through, if you went to the shrine where they worship or commemorate Japanese soldiers, together with, of course, Japanese war criminals in Tokyo, there's a museum next to that shrine. And in that museum, it talks a lot about the Second World War and the reason that caused the Second World War. And if you go to that museum, you get a feeling that the Japanese explains that they went to war because they faced an unfair embargo on one particular commodity, oil. Alright? So, if Henry Pottinger's rule of anyone being able to come to Hong Kong to buy whatever they wanted in whatever quantity that they can afford, the logical extension would be the Japanese come to Hong Kong to buy all the oil they want to and ship back to Japan. Right? But my guess is that Hong Kong uncharacteristically participated in the oil embargo against Japan just before 1941.
I see.
And the reason, my guess is that after 1939, when Churchill, or at least Britain, under Neville Chamberlain, declared war against Nazi Germany, Britain's #1 national goal was to get the Americans to join them. Right? Because they know that without the Americans, they can't beat the Japanese, they can't beat the Germans. So getting the Americans on side was policy #1, and obviously the easiest way to get the Americans on side is to get the Japanese to attack them. And once the Japanese attacks the Americans, or some sort of conflicts break out between the Japanese and Americans, then Nazi Hitler, being Hitler, would then honor his agreement with the Japanese and declare war on whoever the Japanese declared war on. Right. So that was a calculation probably by Churchill himself. Therefore, to provoke the Japanese, you trade embargo them on that one commodity they like, which is oil. All right. So the Hong Kong participated in that. I mean, you would say, "Wow, that's so Machiavellian." Yes. That also, yes, I am saying explicitly, Churchill sacrificed Hong Kong as a pawn in this war against fascism.
That's one unlucky point in Hong Kong.
Yeah, that is why hats off to all those people who stayed in Hong Kong, who might have understood what Churchill was doing when they asked Hong Kong to participate. There's lots of British colonialists stayed in Hong Kong during that period. And if they knew how to play the empire game, they knew that they're going to be provoking the Japanese to attack. Or maybe they were just so blindly trusting in the powers of British imperialism that they thought the Japanese would never dare to attack. Because they might be racists, really, and think that these, yellow folks would never be able to attack the British imperial power. Okay? So, but anyways, that's what the Japanese proved beyond a doubt in 1941, that Hong Kong cannot defend itself, that the British Empire cannot defend Hong Kong, and that should have been the end of Hong Kong. Hong Kong's luck, Hong Kong's luck should have ran out. And once again, if luck is defined as running Victorian-era British imperialistic policies of laissez-faire.
I mean, the history have clearly shown it's a fact. Okay, Hong Kong,
luck should have ran out.
very, very hard to defend from far away.
Yes.
Okay. Period.
Right. So, in 1945, when the Japanese surrendered, because Japanese, of course, obviously they overstretched themselves, right? So they surrendered, and they retreated, and by default, Hong Kong was returned back to the British. Churchill wanted that. Roosevelt suggested putting Hong Kong under United Nations administration. China, being one of the supposed victorious powers, wanted Hong Kong back as well. But then Kuomintang was knee-deep in the civil war against the communists, so Churchill basically got his own way. And Hong Kong was kept as a British colony.
It is amazing that Hong Kong was not given back to China.
Well, yes, but Chiang Kai-shek has this really weird, I guess, relationship with the British as well. I think, because Chiang Kai-shek was buddy-buddy. If you look back in history, Chiang Kai-shek actually went to Nazi Germany to observe how they ran their army, right? So there was this uneasy thing, I guess. Churchill hated everything about the Nazis, right? So they just thought, maybe Churchill thought Chiang Kai-shek wasn't. Chiang Kai-shek was borderline fascist himself. I mean, he never allowed, for example, liberal democracy to flourish in China, right?
Hell no. Yeah.
So so maybe there was something going on there, but Hong Kong wasn't returned. The Churchill sat, but then of course, because the British themselves knew that Hong Kong couldn't be defended, they started thinking about alternative policies, Plan Bs. And one of the Plan Bs they came up with, in fact, very famous within the Occupy Central days last year in Hong Kong, was that a lot of students in Hong Kong said, well, the British first came up with the idea of genuine universal suffrage for the people of Hong Kong to elect our own executive and legislative branches of government in the period just after 1945. That was no coincidence. That wasn't some enlightened stroke of genius. That was on the table because the Brits knew that they couldn't hold Hong Kong. So might as well say, if there's going to be a future of Hong Kong, you guys decide. But then, like so many things in Hong Kong, history intervened again. Surrounding geopolitical situations intervened. First of all, there was of course a civil war in China, and in 1949 the communists won. Right. The communists won, but then of course it is a big country. So in 1949 it took them a few years to settle the country. And Britain, being very smart, was one of the first countries to recognize what was then called Red China. Right? Being a doctorate degree holder, Dr. Bob, you obviously access a system called LexisNexis, right? To find your papers, academic papers, right?
Right.
According to LexisNexis, in fact, which is very heavily American in its academic papers archive, there is no People's Republic of China prior to 1972. Prior to 1972, it's always been called Red China, right? As versus the Republic of China that was based out of Taiwan.
Well, that has nothing to do with my degree.
No, I'm just saying that you're familiar with the LexisNexis system.
Yeah, that I do.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyways, Britain, bucking American pressure, recognized People's Republic of China very quickly. And in its congratulatory telegram, supposedly, Chairman Mao, he says that we have some gifts for you. One of the gifts were there were 2 planes parked on the runways of Hong Kong airport that was owned by the Kuomintang. Nominally assets of the Republic of China, confiscated by the British and given to the People's Republic in Beijing. There was also the half-built Bank of China headquarters. There was in Hong Kong Central, you can go visit. It's built of granite. It's next to the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation's headquarters. And that semi-built headquarters was also confiscated and given to Beijing. Kuomintang wasn't pleased, and they filed a judicial review with the Hong Kong courts, but the Hong Kong courts ruled against them. So it was given to Beijing. Of course, then a very, very important geopolitical event happened that basically saved Hong Kong's bacon.
So this is luck number 2.
Yes, this was probably luck number 2. Luck number 1 being Harry Pottinger taking Hong Kong, and luck number 2 intervening again. Luck number 2 was the Korean War. The Korean War was important for Hong Kong because it was around when Khrushchev seized power after Stalin's death, and in a huff of anger, Soviet Union temporarily pulled out of the United Nations. It was coincided with I think Kim Jong-il, right? Kim Jong-il, the senior Kim, invading the South, trying to reunite the Korean Peninsula. So Kim Jong-il marched into the South, passes the armistice line, the demarcation line between North and South Korea, and they nearly defeated the South. But then, when just before the South got defeated, the United Nations passed a motion through the Security Council to basically kick the North Koreans out of South Korea. General MacArthur led the army, landed at Incheon, which is now the airport for Seoul, and marched towards Pyongyang. I think they got very far. In fact, they were about to approach the Yalu River, which is the river that demarcates the Korean Peninsula.
All the way up north.
Right, that demarcates the Korean Peninsula with mainland China, with communist China.
Right.
So suddenly, supposedly millions of quote-unquote volunteers from mainland China rushed in aid to their North Korean communist comrades, and pushed the Americans back to the armistice line. Okay. But so you would say, well, what's the big deal? The big deal is that when the mainland Chinese volunteers, this is according to official, they call it volunteers, when the Chinese army arrived, the United Nations then passed a trade embargo on the Red China, People's Republic of China itself. So what does it have to do with Hong Kong? It has to do with Hong Kong because Hong Kong fulfilled, at least followed, Harry Pottinger's third rule of being a free port, including the enemies of the British Empire, and there were infamous smuggling activities going on in Hong Kong back then, in which massive amounts of supplies was shipped through Hong Kong into China. Supplies nowadays, supposedly medicine, clothing, stuff like that, fuel, but a lot of people in Hong Kong suspect that a lot of ammunition also got shipped through Hong Kong into China. You got to understand that we are talking about a part of the British Empire, which is part of the Security Council, which supported a trade embargo on Red China. So if people of Hong Kong knew about the smuggling activity, the colonial government in Hong Kong knew it as well. They had to, and yet they condoned it. They didn't do anything to stop it. And we're talking about that they supplied a nation that was actively fighting on the battlefield against their supposed best allies, the American army.
Right.
Think how scandalous is that? But yet that was the exact kind of imperial politics that kept Hong Kong in place.
Well, that Korean War is it's a side story. I actually knew a member who had been in that war. The guy actually has shown me his tattoos. He was part of the Kuomintang. Okay, he got sent over to be a bullet show.
Oh, to be one of the volunteers.
Volunteers. So when you talk about volunteer, I started to laugh. This guy actually had swim towards a U.S. ship.
Right.
Okay, and so that I get to meet him alive.
Oh, okay.
You know.
But
So
yeah.
your volunteers kind of you got to know what they're doing.
So anyway, what is the you might say that because Hong colonial government is incompetent in enforcing the embargo, because basically think about it, it's basically like when say for example the Americans invading Afghanistan and you have a British colony actively shipping things to help the Taliban.
Right.
That is how serious it was, right? Fighting against the
So Hong Kong played a pivotal role,
right,
in terms of the change of the
right.
scenery of history.
Right. As Americans, you might be pissed off, but hey, that was history. Now, what was the geopolitical consequence for Hong Kong? The geopolitical consequence was that suddenly, in the minds of communist China, Hong Kong, being a British colony,
Right.
was extremely useful for its rule and safety. Because the Chinese joined that war because they really sincerely believe General MacArthur is going to be invading into China.
Right.
Because Chairman Mao was raised during a time in which China was constantly being invaded by foreign powers.
Right.
So he was paranoid about being invaded by foreign powers. And
Right.
that was why he quickly sent troops to Tibet, for example. Right? That was why he sent troops into North Korea.
So this message is electrical to the minds in Chairman Mao's mind.
Well, at least Chairman Mao might have been tempted to take Hong Kong back, but I am sure his right-hand man, Zhou Enlai, his basically foreign secretary, Zhou Enlai is just his thinker, told him, no, I think the Korean War has proven beyond a doubt that this little British colony was extremely useful for our own survival. Therefore, we must protect it at all cost. It would be no use to us if it became part of the People's Republic. Ironically. Okay?
So luck number 2.
That was luck number 2, and therefore, even though they sent volunteers by the millions into North Korea to create a buffer zone that is now North Korea, they sent troops into Tibet, for example, they actually actively protected Hong Kong. In fact, with the fall of the British Empire, the greatest inconvenient truth, if you are a member of the Western press, please remember this. The greatest inconvenient truth is that the greatest protector of Hong Kong's way of life as a Victorian era British imperial colony is actually the highest powers of the Chinese Communist Party ever since the Korean War.
God, this line should be a PhD thesis in itself.
But that is the inconvenient truth.
Reality.
That is reality, and that is the inconvenient truth. So, if you're still following me, then that was why. Okay, if you are still watching and you say, "I call BS," I don't buy your hypothesis, right? This thesis is wrong. I just ask you one simple question. The Americans probably knew that Hong Kong played that role during the Korean War.
Right.
And they were not pleased.
I'm sure they know.
Yes. So what happened is that the British still had imperial ambition, right? So in the 1950s, under President Eisenhower, the British, because Egypt had a new ruler, and he threatened to nationalize the Suez Canal, right? To the British, that was an affront. Not only was it an insult, a punch in the eye, but without the Suez Canal, they cannot effectively run any colonies beyond the Suez Canal. Between them and Suez
Absolutely,
Canal,
time is of essence.
right.
Yeah.
So you would say that, well, if Egypt is an independent country, why can't they run the Suez Canal themselves? Why can't they nationalize the Suez Canal? All I can say is this: Panama is also an independent country, but the running of the Panama Canal was only returned to the Panamanians a few years ago from the Americans. The Americans basically control it. So these canal things, canal politics, right? But anyway, so basically the British wanted to do with the Suez Canal what the Americans did with the Panama Canal. Okay, keep control.
Right.
But then when the French and the British sent troops to Egypt, they were quickly called back by America. And basically through that Suez Canal crisis, the Americans effectively told Britain, your days of empire is over. Okay? So ever since the Suez Canal, when the British knew that they can't control the Suez Canal, it became official policy that they are going to give up all of the colonies east of the Suez Canal. India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Burma, Malaya, Singapore,
yeah, right.
Borneo, so on and so forth. Okay? But then all these places became independent, or at least broke away from the British Empire's rule, right?
Well, they still honor the Queen, but
Part of the Commonwealth.
yeah, Commonwealth.
Commonwealth.
Yeah.
But then my question is this: but why Hong Kong? Why was Hong Kong spared?
Okay, so you supported your hypothesis by fact.
Hong Kong was only kept as a British colony, to be honest, at the unofficial request of the Chinese Communist Party.
Because of the specific function it
Right,
serves.
because of the function it had served, and the Chinese Communist Party thought it would be convenient to leave this safety valve.
Actually, I think it is a necessity. In those days, if people who got into the economy of China, post World War II, China could not even manufacture its own a single rim for the bicycle. It's primitive.
It is very primitive.
Okay, it's no joke.
But
you couldn't even forge.
Right. So if you are still watching, that is why in 1970, late 1970s. In fact, in the early 1970s, the British knew that because they are so into politics, right?
Right.
Hong Kong. There was two parts of Hong Kong that was ceded in perpetuity to the British forever, but there was one part that was leased from the Chinese, from the Qing dynasty, from the Qing courts, in 1898 on a 99-year lease basis, and that was the new territories in Hong Kong.
Right.
The new territories were leased on a 99-year basis. So by the early 1970s, Britain knew that that lease, you had to start notice, it's coming to an end.
Right.
And officially, the first people in Hong Kong that raised it as an issue in Hong Kong were the bankers, because the bankers started asking in the late 1970s, well, we have less than 20 years before the end of the lease, can we offer 15-year mortgages in the new territories? Because legally they have no power. It's not a legally enforceable contract.
Right.
Right. And there's no laws. There's no plans when China takes back new territories. But then, of course, if you look at the strategic positioning of the British Empire in the early 1970s, they knew that the lease was coming up, and therefore they had to do something as well. So they were preparing for this. But in 1978, Deng Xiaoping, the then leader, the new leader, who took over from basically a period of turmoil, Deng Xiaoping knew that China's GDP has shrunken so much that economic weakness itself was a threat to national security.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And under that particular situation, he knew that he had to increase the productivity and efficiency of the Chinese economy.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to do that is to withdraw the state from the economy, i.e. liberalization.
Right.
Okay, liberal reforms. Right. But in opening up China, coinciding with the end of the lease, Britain decided to start negotiating the future of Hong Kong in the late 1970s and early 1980s. And Margaret Thatcher famously flew to Beijing to discuss the fate of Hong Kong. And there are many plans in her mind.
The Iron Fist.
The Iron Lady of the West flew to Beijing to talk to these primitive Chinese to discuss the fate of Hong Kong. But Margaret Thatcher had the plan of, say, extending the lease. Perhaps you can hang your flag up, but we'll be the one administering Hong Kong. Lots of these kind of plans, And according to urban legend, Margaret Thatcher flew to Beijing, walked through the Forbidden City, finally meeting Deng Xiaoping in a room. And in that room, there were three people: Deng Xiaoping, his Prime Minister Zhao Ziyang, and also a translator. And Deng Xiaoping simply said, "Welcome to Beijing, Madam Prime Minister. We are taking back Hong Kong."
Right.
And he pointed to his own Prime Minister and said, "He will be one discussing the details with you." And he just walked out. So Margaret Thatcher was so shaken because she had all these ideas, right? She had all these ideas of like maybe extending the lease, maybe negotiating some sort of like shared sovereignty, maybe you hang your flag in China. She was so shaken that she said, "Give me a day, I need to come back tomorrow. I need to go back to my embassy and talk to my staff."
Well, I think this for people listening to this story, they should understand the mentality of Margaret Thatcher at that point.
Yes, because Margaret Thatcher,
powerful lady.
Margaret Thatcher, of course, is an Iron Lady of the West. But you got to understand, geopolitics is based on geography, right?
Right.
So if you're based on geography and based on the trends of empire, geopolitics dictates that no matter who's in charge, unless you are someone as good as Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore or Fidel Castro of Cuba, then defy geopolitics, right? Defy the trends of empire. Margaret Thatcher was going with the flow. And if you were going with the flow, if you were Margaret Thatcher, you would have said to yourself, if the communist Chinese wanted to take back Hong Kong, they would have done so years ago. They could have done what they've done in Tibet. They could have done what they did in North Korea.
Right.
They could have sent.
They can take it by force.
Right, and just walk in. Hong Kong would fall within 48 hours. You know.
Less, yeah.
So if you are leasing a place, a lot of the viewers have been renters before, right? If you've leased a place, you like living in there, and your landlord has no intention, or at least given you no signal to kick you out, and he has every right to kick you out because basically the lease, that he can revoke at any time.
1999.
1997.
1997.
Yeah, but then
right.
communist Chinese has never been very strong, at least up to that point, in enforcement of contracts. And in fact, that particular contract, the Treaty of Nanking, the communists, once they were in power, even before they were in power, called it the unequal treaty that has to be overturned as a national priority.
Right. Even the Kuomintang called the same thing.
Right.
Those are the
unequal treaties.
Unjustifiable contracts.
Right.
Yeah.
That has to be overturned. So nothing is more effective in overturning it than by sending in a few 100,000 volunteers to overrun Hong Kong, right?
Right.
So if you were a leasee and you know that your landlord has not kicked you out, the most natural inclination is to ask for an extension of the lease, right? Just make it official. So she was quite shocked, and in fact she was so shocked, when she left the building that day, you can YouTube watch this, she tripped and fell on the steps of Great Halls of People out in Beijing. Right, you can YouTube this. In fact, I think the staff here can include that footage right now. But anyways, Margaret Thatcher thought that Hong Kong was useful to China. And at that particular juncture of history, when China was opening up to international trade, for example, to capitalism, it needed even more a hyper-capitalist, laissez-faire economy that runs on a common law system that can supply the know-how and the capital into China to rebuild this country. Right?
Right.
Margaret Thatcher didn't figure that Deng Xiaoping came and completely agreed with her and came up with a plan called One Country, Two Systems. One Country, Two Systems.
Now this never existed before. This is no joke. This is ingenious.
Right.
Yeah.
One Country, Two System effectively, and One Country, Two System has supposedly last 50 years from 1997 until 2047. So Deng Xiaoping basically said, this place remains a British colony with Victorian imperial values, with Victorian imperial
I'm not sure those
policies.
are the exact words.
No, I don't know the exact words, but that was what it was
capitalism.
in effect. Right, that was what was supposed to be in effect.
Yeah.
For not only up until 1997, but 50 years after that.
Right.
So Deng Xiaoping positioned itself, once again, as the greatest protector of Hong Kong's luck.
This
you
is
define luck as that.
number 3.
That's probably luck number 3. Well, you gotta understand, Hong Kong with 0.5% of China's population, 0.5, was more than 20% of China's GDP.
This is huge.
Right, we're talking about punching way above our weight. And it's not just economics, it's the culture. Our movies, our music, our language, our usage of words, our terminologies was spreading in China. It was infecting all the Chinese communities around the world. Our soft power, it was during the age in which, ironically, Hong Kong intelligentsia, idiots throughout the ages, of course, the intelligentsia was kept calling Hong Kong as a cultural desert, that was at the apex of our soft power, And anyways, Hong Kong's role was that, and in fact it explains why. All the troubles and all the anger you can see in Hong Kong today. All the anger you see today is because Hong Kong's way of life, biggest protector, has always been the highest powers of the Chinese Communist Party. But unfortunately, with the reduction in the need of Hong Kong, Hong Kong's strategic position has decreased significantly, both because we internally implode policy-wise. Take for example, one of the most wanted commodities in China is baby formula, because milk powder in China is unsafe, according to Chinese mainland parents. The most natural place to buy, of course, is this great free port, Hong Kong. And yet the Hong Kong government stupidly put in place a baby formula export ban.
It's so stupid. You know, the very idea, the very existence of Hong Kong basically disputed by its own policy.
Well, if you of course, this policy wasn't implemented out of the blue by the Hong Kong government. It came by massive pressure of Hong Kong mothers because they wanted to be able to buy baby formula.
Yeah, but reality, you can ship as much milk as you want into Hong Kong.
The Hong Kong mothers don't even want to see temporary bans. So it is ironic that Hong Kong mothers have given birth for their own children. Their own children, because of the very demand that they put in place, has destroyed that magic in which made them unique, made Hong Kong unique, and therefore their own children would not enjoy, the same kind of magic.
Actually, if I understand you correctly, you're quite pessimistic.
I am.
In terms, you're deadly serious about it too. That's what's shocking to me. It wasn't a joke. You, okay, Andrew, actually are so pessimistic. You say, hey, I had enough of this. I see no future. I see no further development in Hong Kong. What do you mean by that?
I would say that because we are talking about geopolitics here, right? We're talking about. We were an accident of geopolitics. We were an accident of imperial history, and we remained part of economy because of further knock-on historical accidents and great gamemanship by the British, right? And unfortunately, this is a trend, historical trend. Geopolitical historical trends, when they start shifting, this go back to my favorite historian, Neil Ferguson. Once that tectonic plate of empire moves, the boundary moves. I mean, I started giving this a lot of thought because I read his book on genocide. His question was, why did genocide in the 20th century, why were they concentrated in various places? Why were there no genocide in Scotland or Argentina, but there was several times in Ukraine and Poland? And one of the key reasons he cited was because of this moving tectonic plate of empire. And you're seeing that in action. Hong Kong's, as a British Empire outpost, the empire boundary should have moved in 1940s, but it was kept in place artificially by, ironically, the power next to it, the mainland Communist Chinese. And nowadays, because Hong Kong's significance has reduced so much, in fact, the most person who understands all this is probably the richest man in Hong Kong, Li Ka-shing. Li Ka-shing, at the beginning of 2015, moved the registration of his two flagship companies, Hutchison and Cheung Kong, out of Hong Kong and into the Cayman Islands, or the Virgin Islands. I can't remember what it was.
That's out of the control of the United States, out of the control of
one of those islands. And the reason is because he can see it. He can see that Hong Kong is no longer significant in the eyes of the Chinese Communist Party's ruling power, the ruling level. And if they no longer provide active protection to Hong Kong, through neglect itself, the lower ranked bureaucrats will run wild. And also, Hong Kong people, lacking the knowledge of playing this empire game, would implode the city, such as placing a baby formula ban into Hong Kong, such as placing a ban of investment by foreigners, i.e. mainland Chinese, into Hong Kong properties and real estate, for example. Right? Placing various bans on immigration into Hong Kong, placing bans on the practitioners of medicine, of law, of accounting coming to Hong Kong, and therefore ending the inflow of their expertise. All these things are working together to implode Hong Kong, and yet all these things can only be resisted if there was active protection coming from mainland China's highest powers, and they're no longer providing the protection.
Well, right.
I can see it coming. But then, of course, I was still optimistic, because if there was one place with enough smart people, because according to the book IQ and the Wealth of Nations, Hong Kong has the highest average IQ in the world. this I account this I give credit to our
Well, actually,
previous.
I have to agree.
This I give a credit to our previous immigration policy called touch base policy. But you can go Wikipedia about the touch base policy. But anyways, if there was one place that can defy this, they can create someone like Fidel Castro that can defy the fall of the Soviet Union and remain communist in Cuba.
Right.
If they can provide, if a place can create someone like Lee Kuan Yew, who became the father of the Singapore Republic, Republic of Singapore, that to this day is still practically.
Well, that's not going to happen here, not in Hong Kong.
No. I thought there might be a chance. So I ran for office in November. I ran for the local councils. It was no big deal. I placed much effort. I ran on a very British imperial values, colonial values policy platform.
Right.
Okay, and I lost. So I was so short of ideas as to how to save this place that I thought maybe I'll even put myself up as a possible solution. Of course, I don't call myself Fidel Castro or Lee Kuan Yew, but in the case of Fidel Castro, he needed a Che Guevara, right? And I just thought I might put.
Well, it's
50 years later, there might be American college students around the world that'll be wearing my silhouette, black and white silhouette on their T-shirts. I was just hoping for that. But I lost. The people have spoken. I failed to receive the public mandate. So if the people cannot rise to the occasion, then geopolitics will take over. And I'm not pessimistic. I'm just being a realist.
Okay.
Hong Kong's fate would either be China's Monaco or China's Puerto Rico.
Would it be possible that suddenly the central government of China, under the leadership of President Xi, suddenly realize what's happening in Hong Kong and alter this whole phase? Because Hong Kong still, today, we had our, when we started this program, I asked you about the core value. Okay, the core value of Hong Kong, is the idea of capitalism. Let's don't get into the right or wrong. Okay?
Hong Kong's core ideal is to make sure it remains useful to neighboring hostile powers.
Got you. All right.
Capitalism
Because that is the thesis, the key. And do we still have that?
Unfortunately, I don't think. I think, of course, Hong Kong, the bureaucrats in Hong Kong doesn't have that class. They have a different class. They have a lower class in playing this empire game. We're talking about, if you use a British term analogy, we're talking about, it used to be World Cup standard, right? The British imperialists played at a World Cup level, and now we're probably Division 2, Division 3 football skills. If you use an American analogy, it will be like, the Brits played the NFL football game, right? And the Hong Kong bureaucrats nowadays are playing, college Division 2. They have no idea. They have no high school level. They have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea the playbook.
Let me pat myself a little bit on the shoulder.
I went to Michigan. I went to University of Michigan. I went to University of Michigan at the same time as Tom Brady. So I watched Tom Brady on the field in college, and he wasn't that good. But anyways, carry on. That was a side thing.
Zhang Zhenhua,
Yes,
right? We all hope that he might even be participating as one of our leaders in the future. Let's put it this way. I talked to him about 20-some years ago.
Really?
Yeah, talked to him quite a bit. Okay.
Oh.
And don't ask me how, but somehow he visited the United States. I was there.
Well, you guys should have bong or something.
We had a long chat.
Okay.
At that point, I was naively thinking about geopolitical problems in Hong Kong. All I've seen is that the entire Hong Kong, all the factories, the technologies, everything's being shipped north, shipped back to China. Hong Kong's left with a thin skull.
A shell.
Yeah, it's a shell where you can crack, and there's nothing in it.
Okay.
Other than a few people, and all I can see this ants running away.
What did he say?
You just gave me a scenario, okay, that this show is about to crack. How much reserve we have left?
Well,
First of all, I'm curious as to what he would have said.
Well, as a good politician, he nodded his head.
Okay. But anyways, are there scenarios in which, because, as I say, we're an artificial construct. Hong Kong should not be run under a British common law system. You know, Hong Kong shouldn't be running on a laissez-faire, Victorian era style laissez-faire economic system. Right? These are all accidents of history.
Yeah.
It was put in place first. It first remained in place by sheer British imperial will, and then it remained in place by communist Chinese imperial will.
It's no longer needed.
Right. It's no longer valued by them. Therefore, they're no longer putting the attention in protecting it. Do not think of the Chinese Communist Party as a monolithic entity. Its highest powers and its local officials constantly have tension. Right. So if the highest powers don't pay attention, the standing committee of the Politburo. If the standing committee of the Politburo don't pay attention, the lower rank official will start running wild, and that's exactly what you're seeing in Hong Kong. You know, all kinds of weird. It's rational for them under their own game theory calculation. They should be pissing off the people of Hong Kong with their actions, therefore bolstering the support they get from the central government. It's very weird how their calculations are working out, but that's unfortunately the Nash equilibrium. If you are into economics. So, anyways, we are in the trend. You know, I won't say that I feel like a Jew in Germany in the early 1930s. I won't go as far as that. But the trend is not a friend. The trend is definitely not a friend. The question is, do you want to, give you a Malaya, Singapore scenario. Do you want to be in, say, Johor Bahru now, or do you want to be in Singapore now? Do you wish to move from Johor Bahru into Singapore when the British Empire fell? You know, I can't give you an example in the Indian subcontinent, or the Middle East, right? But these are the consequences of what happens when the tectonic plates of empire moves. You know, I don't know if Neil Ferguson would watch this. If Neil Ferguson is watching this, Professor Ferguson, thank you very much, especially at this point, if you're still watching it. But yes, I simply stole your ideas and extrapolated to Hong Kong, which you should study into. Because this is a really weird British colony that is supposed to be a British colony with British colonial values until 2047. By diktat of a dictatorial communist regime in China. And yet it's now fading away because this soft acid washing of these kind of structures.
Well, I couldn't help but first of all, I feel sad to see you leave. Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm emigrating.
And secondly, okay, I think that my thin skull theory will probably work out.
No, I'm not as pessimistic as you are. I mean, if Hong Kong there are many rules against, say, starting a business. You would think that starting a business would be easy in Hong Kong. That's what's his name in America always says. Crowdfunding in Hong Kong is actually illegal. Give an example. There's no competition in the IPO market. It's all run by one exchange. Highly regulated everything. So we are losing our crown. I mean, the shell is because within us there is a slow implosion going on, and there is no one that can.
Now listen carefully. This comes from authority. The slow implosion that's going on. This is December
22nd.
December 22nd, 2015.
Well, I'll just add an extra point. You have the big two camps right now in Hong Kong politically. It's the pro-establishment camp, i.e. the Blue Ribbon, the one that supports the police and the government, and by extension, I guess, mainland China. That's what the press calls them. And then there's the Yellow Ribbon, the student leaders, the Democrats, the ones that says fight for universal suffrage. I'm sorry, but neither camps, as of this moment, can provide a solution to resist this moving of the tectonic plates of empire.
Before I let you go, I need to ask you one more question. What if, let's play the what if. What if Hong Kong government, this so-called new, the 4G, what would you call that?
The new, I don't know. They created a new cabinet position. They created a new cabinet position within the Executive Council of Hong Kong that is in charge of technology.
Whatever the advances they use, to me that's an advance. Okay, all I'm saying is let us say that Hong Kong somebody realized the shortcoming, realized it's losing its strength. What about the possibility, hypothetically speaking, you set up Hong Kong as a financial center, concentrate on it, and also set up as a movie-making center,
No.
concentrate on it.
The biggest problem is that this particular person, if you were to play an Empire game on that level, we're talking about Lee Kuan Yew kind of Fidel Castro kind of, it is extremely tough.
Somebody with vision.
Yeah, but no,
Yeah.
because Hong Kong system is so rule based.
Mm-hmm.
This individual will find a hard time to emerge. This individual can't emerge. In fact, there is no yearning for this individual. People are dying for an answer, but even those who can provide an answer would be deemed not fit.
That's what I try to get out from you. Before you go.
The answer is, unfortunately, to go back to be as different to mainland China as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever
Okay.
they do, whatever they don't do, we do.
Okay.
Right? That would be
Because
the essence.
that distinguishes Hong Kong.
Yes, but unfortunately, that means that we don't provide protection for our elderlies, for example. We don't do any labor market intervention. We open our doors wide open to professionals around the world, doctors, lawyers, accountants.
Right.
We're talking about the non-enforcement of lots of laws, intellectual property laws for one, the non-enforcement of smuggling laws. Go back to basics. But to go back to that era is impossible now. Hong Kong people are just too efficient. Our bureaucracy is too efficient for anyone to actually put a stamp on the bureaucracy itself and say, don't move. The British did it by underfunding everything. We had a financial secretary. The current one is called John Zhang, right?
Right.
Right. Zheng Zhenhua. But there was one in the 1960s called John Cowperwaith. And Cowperwaith believed that he so perhaps because of imperial politics, he underfunded even the statistics department. He didn't even want the government to know what was going on, just in case bureaucrats wanted to intervene. Maybe because he firmly believed in laissez-faire economics, right?
Right.
The ideals of, say, Hayek or even Rothbard or even Mises or Adam Smith. But maybe he was simply playing the imperial game. If the government didn't know about the statistics, then our enemies wouldn't know, right? And therefore reduce their incentive to attack. It could simply be coming down to that. But that was how extreme they needed to take it. We're talking about the end of the complaint culture in Hong Kong, whereby you complain to a bureaucracy, the bureaucracy would respond. Because back then the bureaucracy simply wouldn't respond. So it is turning the clock back. I'm sorry, but the locally trained Chinese, Hong Kong Chinese administrative office, the Mandarin, the bureaucrats of our system doesn't have that wisdom to play this game. And it is an inevitability that we would be overrun and this little accident of history will cease to exist.
Yeah, my worry, judging from what you have told me as well as the audience, is when Hong Kong's reserve is bankrupt, or money gone 50%.
Right. We have a fiscal reserve that is about, I think, 40-50% of our GDP.
Right.
And
we're quickly spending them.
Well, we are still accumulating. We're still accumulating national. We are still running a fiscal surplus. But that is our final line of defense. The end of Hong Kong would probably come with a banking crisis caused by a asset price crash, most likely caused by a property price crash, that leads to instability in the banking system, and therefore bailing out the banks. The government will be conned by the bankers to just simply give them a guarantee, because the bankers will tell them that their assets are
we
problem.
can't print money like U.S.
Right. So we'll run our money, and like Greece, Puerto Rico today, we will one day wake up and realize that our financial secretary can no longer access our tax department's computer. And when you lose the power to tax or control the taxation system, your country ceases, or at least your government ceases to have any real power.
Sad, isn't it?
That is it's not really sad, but at least you know, if you have the patience to watch this video, even to this point, I mean, this video is now
Don't worry,
in a territory.
I'm going to petition this into a few programs.
Okay. But
to entice everybody.
if you have got to this part of the video and you're still watching it, at least be blessed that you have the wisdom to stay watching and get to know this fact or this future of ours.
What about even...
We had a good run. I mean, Dr. Bob, we have to, you know, I co-founded an institute called the Lion Rock Institute in order to promote the idea of the Lion Rock spirit, which is the laissez-faire economics that ran Hong Kong, that created, together with the touch-based immigration policy, one of the greatest economic miracles of the 20th century. We had 500,000 people in 1945 at the end of the Second World War when the Japanese surrendered. In 35 years, in 1980, our population rose tenfold. And yet in 1980, our 0.5% of population, compared to China, was already 20% of their GDP. You know,
what is it today?
Less than 3%. In fact, that was the exact statistic. Li Ka-shing's good friend, a female friend of his, called Solina Chow, quoted earlier this year when she advised the people of Hong Kong, you should change your mentality, because honestly, we're no longer that important, because we are less than now 3% of China's GDP. She said that not to belittle us. She said that with wholehearted sincerity and disappointment, because with the fall of economic importance and with the imploding of our strategic importance, of the lack of skills in playing the empire game, we basically removed all advantages. Well, not advantages, but we removed all roles in which we are unique in Hong Kong, and therefore this erosion will occur. I mean, it's happening on all fronts. Our salespeople in our retail shops now speak Mandarin better than Hong Kong Chinese. You look at our TV, the most watched TV channel in Hong Kong, for example, their shows are already beginning to seep in mainland Chinese usage of words with the erosion of the Hong Kong culture. The advertisement on these channels are already heavily influenced by mainland usage of words, because they're selling to mainland consumers, right? And you see all the violent struggles from Hong Kong. You know, the bomb that they discovered outside the Legislative Council. Okay?
Right.
It was like a puny, I don't know,
It was a joke.
It was a joke fire bomb, right?
Yeah.
It was like a bottle of, I don't know, alcohol or something, right? But they arrested 6 people, right? The anti-mainland shoppers protests. These sort of typical violent struggles of when tectonic plates of empire shifts, and when one group of individuals of the old empire is resisting the invasion of the new. This invasion might not be overt, but once this invasion reaches some, there's 3 particular qualities, right? The first, according to my Pele historian,
right,
Neil Ferguson, in order for genocide to occur, you have to have 3 qualities. The first one is moving tectonic plates of empire,
right,
which we have in Hong Kong.
Which we have.
We have. The second one is we have 2 distinctive groups of individuals living in the same place. They might even be racially the same, like they were in Sarajevo, where in the mass graves they dig people out. They can identify clearly who they are because of medical records,
right,
but they don't really know which wave of genocide they will kill them, because they have so many different facets to their character and identity. They could be a Muslim, but they happen to be a Bosnian, they happen to be a Croatian, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah,
so they don't know you don't know if he was killed because he was a Muslim or because he was a Croatian. You know, which waves killed whom, you don't know. But in Hong Kong, the same thing. We have 2 groups of distinct individuals. Those left over who carries with them the British colonial DNA and the new migrants that's arriving. And also, unfortunately, the children who are born to these British colonialists, right? I myself, I would give birth to this child. This child would not remember what it was back then. It wouldn't remember the days when the British didn't enforce, say for example, intellectual property laws. When the British didn't enforce, say, smuggling laws, right? When most famous signs in all the video game arcades was the one that says no smoking and no one ever followed it. People of Hong Kong of that generation don't know it. And they are now becoming the majority. We're talking about 2 or 3 million of them now, right?
Right.
Within 10 to 15 years, they will be the majority. And these two distinctive group of individuals, the one representing the mainland China and Hong Kong, most important thing is when you have two distinctive group of individuals existing in the society, they have to view each other as Untermensch, subhuman. Okay? The pro-Chinese, the pro-mainland, pro-blind loyalty to the mainland government will be best because the mainland government is the best. Those individuals view these pro-democracy, universal suffrage, these colonial relics as foreign dogs, right? They are dogs that serve foreign masters and foreign ideals. And the other way round, those left over from the British, those waving their flags saying that we should, have the rule of law in Hong Kong and protect the, maybe promote universal suffrage, right? These individuals view mainlanders as what?
I don't want to name it.
I'll say it. Locusts.
Right.
So it fulfills the second criteria. First criteria being the moving tectonic place of empire. The second criteria being having two groups of individuals living in the same place. And the third criteria, which is coming, economic upheaval. That's what Neil Ferguson said, right? Economic upheaval. According to me, Hong Kong Chinese are very simple. When a bunch of money has been lost, economic upheaval usually comes with a banking crisis because something happened to the savings and the loans that was lent out.
It almost happened in the United States not that long ago.
Yeah, the savings and loans crisis.
Well,
Right?
Bernanke came up there. What do you think happened?
But they don't. In America, there is no changing tectonic place of empire.
Right. No.
No. It's not like you can argue.
But we have.
You can argue that Mexico is taking over practically everything in the South, right? But
Right.
hey, that's an American problem, not mine. Hey, I don't want to do a Donald Trump, but you can build that wall. But in Hong Kong, you see it, and I don't know what's going to happen to China. Mainland China is going through. If you ask me, President Xi Jinping, since he gone to office in 2012, right?
Right.
His number one and sole mission, only mission, is to solve the bad debt crisis of China. Everything everything he announced is to solve that problem.
Right.
Even the environment takes a second seat. I'm sorry,
Right.
when Beijing is covered in smog, that comes back.
Well, it came up the two crises already.
Because bad debt, my friends, nothing removes dictators from office faster than a banking crisis. But I will leave that for another episode.
Thank you very much for patiently watching, but you will be honored